Central Time. Good afternoon. My name is Hallie Leinhardt. I'm the Outreach Specialist for the Center for Financial Security at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the newly published book, It's Not Like I'm Poor, How Working Families Make Ends Meet in a Post-Welfare World. Today we have joining with us two of the authors of the book, Sarah Halpern-Meakin and Laura Tack. Sarah is an assistant professor in the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Sarah is also a CFS research affiliate. Laura Tack is an assistant professor in the College of Human Ecology in the Department of Policy Analysis and Management at Cornell University. And our discussants today are Robin McKinney, director and co-founder of the Maryland Cash Campaign and adjunct professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and Julian Huerta, deputy executive director at Foundation Communities, which is a nonprofit located in Austin, Texas. And just a reminder before we get started with the presentations, to submit questions to be answered in the question and answer portion that takes place in approximately the last 10 minutes of the webinar. Please do submit your questions in the Q&A box located on the left side of your screen throughout the presentations. And with that, I will turn it over to Sarah and Laura.
Thank you, Hallie, and we want to thank CFS in general for this opportunity to discuss our work with you today. What we're going to be presenting is based on our book, It's Not Like I'm Poor, that was recently released. The book itself provides a lot more details about the ideas that we're going to discuss with you today, and it was co-authored with Kathy Eden from Johns Hopkins and Jennifer Sykes from Michigan State. So our plan today is to give you a very brief overview of how our welfare system has changed, and then we'll talk about the Earned Income Tax Credit specifically, what that refund means for families, and how the refunds that families receive at tax time play a role in their financial well-being. So we're going to explain both the symbolic and the practical role that tax refunds play in parents' financial and family lives. So on your left, you're looking at an old welfare office. Over the door it says Overseers of the Public Welfare. And this is really symbolic, we think, of the way that cash welfare has been in this country. It's a program that offers assistance but with a side of stigma. And in a study that was done of the welfare system before welfare reform happened in the mid-1990s, researchers Catherine Eden and Laura Lane found that neither welfare-reliant nor work-reliant low-income single mothers could make ends meet. So neither welfare nor work was enough for families to really get by. Since that time, there's been a major overhaul of our country's system for supporting lower-income families, and our new system really focuses on work-conditioned benefits. So our old welfare system, Aid to Families with Dependent Children, has been replaced with Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF, which requires that recipients engage in work activities in return for receiving benefits. In addition to that change in the cash welfare system, there's been a big expansion since the mid-1990s in the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a refundable tax credit available to lower income families. So today, the welfare rolls have plummeted while the number of people benefiting from the EITC have expanded, and a lot more single mothers are in the labor force today than they were in the early 1990s. The welfare rolls have fallen more than 60% since the passage of welfare reform in 1996. And what that means is that only 1.8 million families received cash assistance from TANF in 2013. In the meantime, the number of people benefiting from refundable tax credits, in particular the EITC, has really exploded. So in the early 1990s, around 8 million households received the credit. By 2013, more than 27 million households received the credit. So today, rather than heading to the welfare office, families now are receiving government assistance when they file their taxes, often at for-profit tax preparers like H&R Block, as you see on the right-hand side of your screen.
So how does the EITC work? Here's a little bit of background for you. As you can tell from this picture, the structure of the refund is quite complicated, but here are a few basics that are good to know before we proceed. First, there's just a very small benefit for workers who do not have dependent children in the household, and there's much larger benefits if you have children. The refund is zero if you don't work, and benefits increase the more you earn, which is called the phase-in rate, up till about $13,000 for single parents. And then the benefits start to phase out around $18,000 and extends very far up the income ladder till just over $40,000. And single parents are the majority of EITC claimants, but there is a separate schedule for married parents, and the income limits are a little bit higher for them. In addition to this federal refund, 25 states also offer their own EITCs, which are typically set as a percentage of the federal EITC. And beyond that, many families also qualify for this additional refundable child tax credit. So the total tax refund that a low-income worker could receive can be even larger than what they get from the federal EITC alone. And so as you can tell by the amounts on this chart, the EITC can be a pretty hefty chunk of a family's annual income. And so the goal of our study was to discover how families are faring under this new EITC-based safety net. So to do this, we recruited families from the Boston metropolitan area. And now nationally, about 70% of EITC claimants file their taxes with a for-profit organization like H&R Block, while about 30% use other methods, either through a nonprofit VITA site, or they file taxes themselves or have a family member file for them. So we surveyed about 300 tax filers at 3 types of places in order to capture these different groups of filers. We recruited people at H&R Block sites, at nonprofit tax preparation VITA sites, and then also at some Head Start centers in order to capture the population of people who are filing taxes on their own outside of those 2 major types of organizations. At the time when we got them right after they were filing and receiving their refunds, and we asked them what they planned to do with them, and then we got permission to recontact them later. So the second phase of our study involved in-depth interviews with a stratified random sample of those original tax filers. So about 6 months after they had filed their taxes, we recontacted 120 families, and they were stratified based on their race, in order to have a range of white, Black, and Hispanic families, and also their filing status, whether they were single head of household or married, in order to get a diverse array of experiences of families in our samples. And all of the families that were in our in-depth interview sample had to have received at least $1,000 for their tax refund. Of the 120 families we tried to reach out to, we were able to successfully interview 115 of them. These interviews were in-depth. They ranged from 1.5 to 5 hours and lasted on average about 2.5 hours. From each family, we got detailed budgets, trying to capture what things looked like financially during the few months around right after they got their refund, and what things looked like during the rest of the year for them as well. In addition to that, the budgets, we explored what their financial experiences were like, what the decisions that they made meant to them, and how tax time broadly fit within the larger context of their lives. So this is what the financial situation was for the families in our study. Single mothers earned about $1,500 a month in earned income, and that translated into about just over $18,000 a year on average, which put mothers, based on their earned income, just above the federal poverty line for a family of 3. But you can see that their tax refunds on average were quite hefty as well, about $4,500, which was almost a quarter of their total earned income on average. But what these averages and annual incomes hide in this table is the frequent instability that families faced in our sample.
So many of the parents in this sample had seasonal jobs, jobs like teachers' aides or preschool staff, construction workers, and even the tax preparers at H&R Block. So they would spend part of each year without a paycheck. Others had jobs in the retail or service sectors or with temp agencies, so their hours and their income would fluctuate pretty often. So a home health aide who we interviewed would describe how a patient would enter the hospital one week and, from one week to the next, she would lose a third of her hours. So things were really in flux for many families. Many would say that they had sort of come to expect that something would derail them financially at some point during the year. We hear this from Jerry Morales. That's a pseudonym, and all the people whose stories we'll be sharing with you today will be using pseudonyms to protect their identities. So Jerry Morales lived with his wife Tessa and their 3 children, who were 5, 7, and 14, and his mother lived with them also in their housing project in South Boston. Jerry's 32 years old and white. He works 2 jobs. He works full-time during the week in the mail room at a local community college, and on the weekends is a truck driver for a bakery, delivering donuts during his 2 a.m. shift. And sometimes he really gets discouraged by the surprise expenses that just seem to continually pop up. He told us, "My dream basically is to get a house and be settled financially, everything. That's all I ever wanted. No matter how much we try, there's always something that just kicks us in the butt." And Jerry's wife, Tessa, told us about a recent year when she had lost her waitressing job. Then she says, "My mom passed away. I just had my youngest daughter. Jerry got sick and couldn't work. So it was a stressed year." And the Morales' story is not atypical for the families we met. Families' incomes often left them not being able to keep up with their regular expenses in any given month, let alone with room to pay down debts like their credit card bills or their student loans. And so each month was really a juggling act for parents as they figured out what they should pay, what they should let slide. They would hope for a forgiving landlord or an employee at the electric company who really did believe that the check was in the mail. And given these circumstances, it's not so surprising to learn that tax time was such a source of anticipation for so many people. People used phrases like winning the lottery, getting a bonus, and tax time being better than Christmas to describe this time of year. So here's how parents spent those refund dollars. 1/4 of refund dollars were devoted to what we call current consumption. That's what you'll see in orange here. And that allowed families the sort of rare opportunity to pay all of their monthly obligations in full, pay their bills, their groceries, buy staple items for the household, pay their child expenses. Another 1/4 of refund dollars, shown in purple here, were taken up by back bills and debts. People were able to get debt collectors off their backs. They could make steps to repair their damaged credit scores. And the modal parent in our study who devoted any of their refund to debt payoff was actually able to reduce their outstanding debts by half, which is really an accomplishment given how cash-strapped most of these households are most of the year. Another 17% of refund dollars were initially saved. You see that here in blue. Most of those savings were typically deployed towards easing financial shocks that came over the next few months. And so that meant about 6 months after tax time, most of that initial savings had actually been spent. Only 7% of refund dollars still remained in savings. People did also manage to invest some of their refund dollars in what we might term assets. That's shown in red here. And people did aspire to assets like buying a home, having a really robust retirement account or college savings account for the kids, but most of the assets that we saw people investing in were smaller. They would buy durable goods like a used car or a standalone freezer, washers and dryers, furniture for the household, those sorts of things. And the EITC recipients we talked to spent only about $1.10 on treats. That's shown here in green. And what we considered treats were things like special meals out at a sit-down restaurant, a weekend trip to New Hampshire, those sorts of things. And we were really interested in explaining what was driving these allocation patterns. What was the broader context of families' lives that shaped their decisions about how to spend and save this refund money? So When we were showing you how people spent their money, we talked about things like home ownership, and those were things that they really very much valued. But that wasn't the way that they mostly spent their money, right? They were mostly investing in what we call economic security. So I want to touch on several different ways that families went about deploying their EITC dollars to buy themselves some economic security. And the first is in paying down debt. So for a regular month, not during tax time, the typical household in our sample paid about $173 toward their outstanding debts. That's 6% of their monthly expenditures. But most entered tax season, as I said, with pretty heavy tax burdens. And so tax season was really seen as a time of year to pay down debt. And paying down debt offers a psychological relief, but it also has a really practical implication, which is that it gives more space for the future accumulation of debts. There's only so long you can go without paying your electric bill before it gets shut off, or without paying your rent before your landlord evicts you. So by getting caught up, it means when times are tight in the future, you can fall behind on that electric bill again, or maybe have your landlord be a little more flexible with you. We see this from Sharon Ingram, who's a 47-year-old black clerical worker. She has a 21-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. She paid off her credit card debt in full with her refund, and when we asked how she decided to spend her refund check, she said she prioritized paying off bills to just get a little bit ahead of the game, just get a little ahead of myself, just breathe a little better. So that way, when my paychecks were coming into deposit, 3 out of my 4 bills were already paid. What a feeling. And now I could just sit on that. It made it a lot easier. So paying down debt is one of the ways that families invest in their own economic security. Another way is by buying durable goods. We heard about this from Linda Valdez, who's a 41-year-old Hispanic single mother. She has 2 elementary school-aged daughters. And during her visit to her apartment in a South Boston housing project, she proudly showed us the bedroom set she had bought for her daughters with her refund money. It was 2 white twin beds and matching dressers decorated with little painted flowers on them. Her job is part-time. She cleans offices, and she doesn't earn much. And since her daughter's father left her for someone else, he really hasn't helped out much financially. Before they started getting SNAP food stamps pretty recently, they had sometimes run short on food. And that's why something like this new bedroom furniture can feel like such a triumph for Linda and her family. Their hold on financial stability is so weak that any signs of its presence in their life are really welcome. So before tax time, Linda says, my daughters didn't have a bed, and that left the 3 of them sharing her bed. Between the mattresses, the furniture, and the delivery costs, she spent about $1,500 of her $6,000 refund check buying the bedroom set, and it totally felt worth it to her. The next way that we saw families investing in their own economic security was by stockpiling. We saw this from Brenda Hutchinson, a 38-year-old white married school lunch aide. She explained that when her tax refund check comes, she takes her 2 daughters to BJ's Warehouse, which is like Costco. It's a big box store. And this year, they spent $400 on meat, which she stores in her mother's standalone freezer, and they also bought large quantities of pizza bagels and cases of soup. And she tells us, I just keep them stocked up so you don't have to worry about running out of food, you know? The fact that families use their refund dollars in this way reflects the reality that these parents often have too little income to make it through the month, even though many do receive something from SNAP, from food stamps. The final way we saw families purchasing some economic security for themselves was by savings. LaWanda James is a 23-year-old black single EMT. She's the mother of an elementary schooler. She said, just for a rainy day, a real rainy day, a thunderstorm, a blizzard, a hurricane, I want to save. Just want to have a nice cushion of money. And LaWanda currently had no savings. And that's part of what makes the tax refund so prized. It offers this unique opportunity that families don't experience during other times of the year to set aside a chunk of cash all at once, giving families the sense that they have an emergency fund to rely on when there is a sudden unexpected expense or a sudden unexpected drop in income.
So Sarah has described for you kind of the dollars and cents of how families allocated their refunds and why they allocated their dollars in that way. And the second goal of our project was really to understand the deeper meaning of what receiving the EITC meant to parents. And so although parents' knowledge of the tax code was often quite fuzzy, just like the rest of the general population's perception of taxes is, the families in our sample typically knew that they got a large refund because they worked and because they had kids. And this tie between their role as working parents and their receipt of this large refund made them really feel like they had earned the money. Unlike many other forms of government assistance, the refunds delivered through the tax system felt like they were a reward for working. And this can be particularly important for the families in our sample who were working jobs with very low wages, poor working conditions, and little chance for career mobility. And so in addition to this association with work, the tax refund check also allowed families and parents to feel like they were being the sort of parents they wished that they could be all year long. And so, for example, this is what 25-year-old Claire Haynes, a white single mother of 3 who works in food services, told us about her refund check. She said, "I was able to buy the kids something that they were wanting. You know, I can't do that often. She's big into Dora, the children's cartoon character. Yeah, Dora is big in her life, so I was able to get her a little wooden Dora table and chairs. She sits there and eats dinner. Sometimes the kids get what they need, but it's not what they want. It's what they need, but they may not like it. So, you know, with this money, this refund, I was able to take some of it to the store and let them pick out their own clothes. It might have been a couple of dollars more expensive, or it might have even been double the price, but the point was they got what they needed, and at the same time, they felt like $1 million because they actually got what they wanted. My kids felt like $1 million." And so from this quote, you can see how the EITC really allowed parents to make purchases that made their children feel, as one mother put it, like they were ordinary American kids. So these two themes of the refund being a reward for work and a chance to treat their kids to something special emerged very strongly throughout the course of our interviews. And you can contrast this with the kind of heavily laden tones of a welfare recipient label, in which one is seen as a dependent, taking from others, and serving as a poor role model to one's children. And so part of the difference between receiving the EITC and receiving cash welfare through TANF was that, you know, a welfare recipient receives overt scrutiny from a caseworker, but at H&R Block, tax prep specialists are explicitly tasked with getting you, the customer, the largest refund possible. Any scrutiny is occurring outside of sight at the IRS. And also, getting government assistance through the tax system is far less visible than doing it through the welfare office. You go and you file your taxes and get a refund check just like many millions of other working Americans across the income spectrum who also are getting a range of tax breaks, deductions, and credits. So while the old welfare system made parents feel like social outcasts, this new version through the EITC is really unique in many ways as a social assistance program in the social benefits that it offers. It affirms rather than denies the feelings of social inclusion for its beneficiaries.
So politicians, academics, and the general public often wonder why families aren't doing more to use this tax time windfall to make the sort of investments that could offer them upward mobility, higher education, buying a home, investing in some higher yield sort of vehicles. And what we find is that parents do try to get ahead. They do have those dreams about buying that house, about moving to a better neighborhood, about, you know, getting a college education for themselves and their children. But the small purchases that they do make in the present are really important to their economic security, as well as really meaningful in reaffirming their status as workers and their ability to be the sorts of parents that they want to be. So it's important to understand that there may be a trade-off between those two things, economic security and the possibility of mobility. So low-income workers are better off than welfare recipients were pre-welfare reform. This is one of our basic conclusions of our study. People are better off, those who are able to get jobs. But volatility remains common, despite the fact that many are benefiting from government assistance. Importantly, we find that assistance via tax refunds is socially incorporating rather than stigmatizing. And this really sets these sorts of benefits apart from other types of government assistance like food stamps or housing support or cash welfare. We see a large portion of families' refund allocations are being used to buy economic stability as opposed to mobility. So by paying ahead, by setting aside money for later spending, by paying down debts, and by investing in durable goods, families are really creating a personal safety net for themselves so they can catch themselves when they fall, when tough times inevitably come, when unexpected expenses pop up, or when their incomes fall. One mother noted, "I don't consider us poor. We're just like right there in the middle. Like I never run out of Pampers because when I have the money, I stock up on everything so that when I am broke, I don't need anything." Many low-income workers expect to have times throughout the year when money runs short, and this means that tax refund time offers the chance to pay down debts and stockpile goods so that when hard times hit, there is some credit available. There's a bit of savings left over, and there's some food in the pantry to get them through tough times. So here we viewed tax refund time and the meaning of that tax refund check in the larger context of families' lives. We hope to shed light on how lower-income families' financial lives work and also how the tax refund fits into that greater context. I'm now going to turn things over to Robin.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks to the Center for Financial Security for hosting this webinar, and thanks to the authors for this great book, and also for raising up the stories of people's lives. I think that that is so often missed, so I've really enjoyed the book, so thank you so much for that. I'm Robin McKinney. I'm the director of the Maryland Cash Campaign. Cash stands for Creating Assets, Savings, and Hope, and we promote programs, products, and policies that improve the financial security of low to moderate income individuals and families. We're a statewide organization. We work with local nonprofits, community college, faith-based groups across the state of Maryland. Right now we're in 19 out of the 24 counties in Maryland. We do capacity building and training, coordinate financial education, and conduct research and advocacy. As you can see here, our partners prepare a lot of tax returns for free, over 18,000 last year. And we have a big focus on getting the word out about the EITC, as well as providing financial education and financial coaching. So on the federal EITC, one of the reasons why we really think the policy works is generally it does have bipartisan support. In these times, I think that that's become increasingly important and challenging. Even the roots of the EITC, when you hear how politicians described it when it was first starting, it was a way to reward work or sort of make work pay. So this understanding that you had to work in order to get the benefit, people see that, and they know, at least at some deep level, that it does cost more to be poor. And so you want to make work more productive. Also because it's not means tested, right? This isn't like temporary cash assistance or food stamps or any of these other benefits. There's no other applications needed besides filing the free tax return. So you don't have the sort of staffing that you have to have from a sort of human resources standpoint or different federal and state agencies that have to implement this. Of course, the IRS has to make significant investments to make sure that the program is being run properly, but at the local level, you don't have that additional investment needed. Some of the current issues, though, that are being debated at the federal level is, taxpayers do go in and out of eligibility. I've seen some stats that say that over half of Americans at some point in their lifetime will be eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit. And lots of people only use it for a few years at a time. And so because people are going in and out of eligibility based on their income changes or their household status or the ages of their children, it can be really confusing for taxpayers. It can be very confusing for the taxpayers as well as for the IRS. And so there's a lot of sort of money and debate that goes into how accurate these tax returns are. And we do know that there's fraud. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of the fraud is actually by tax preparers. While we certainly know that there are, issues with some taxpayers, we see a lot in Maryland, I'm sure other folks across the country see it, of people intentionally creating fraudulent Earned Income Tax Credit filing. So we see this by adding in self-employment income that doesn't exist, adding other dependents. There's actually a tax preparer here in Baltimore that used to keep a running list of names and Social Security numbers to add dependents if needed to get somebody a higher earned income tax credit. Another challenge, of course, is that it is a big ticket item. You know, this is a major budget outlay for the federal government, and so because of that, anytime you have a program that has sort of that much money attached to it, it can often be seen as a target. And we see a couple policy gaps, and for folks who will get this afterwards, anything that you see in blue and underlined is a live link, so you'll see some of those. So we have a listing that through the tax credits for working families has a great sort of updated list of each bill every year around the federal EITC. So there's always bills to expand it each year. There's a lot of people who are looking at this. The marriage penalty is one that I know we get pretty fired up about here, because if you are filing as married filing separately, you actually can't claim the earned income tax credit. And there are just so many cases of people who are separated but still married, and sometimes even for many years are filing as separate. But if they aren't able to sort of upgrade to a head of household status, they're not able to claim it, and that just creates a lot of challenges. Also, for childless workers or non-custodial parents, the amount that you can get for the earned income tax credit is so much smaller than for a parent or guardian with dependent children. And for especially single filers, and we see this particularly with men who may owe child support or other sort of debts that can be garnished, a lot of times it actually just isn't worth it for them to file a tax return and get that little bit of money back, because it would all be taken up by debts. So if we could make the credit larger for childless workers or non-custodial parents, I think we would be able to lift even more people out of poverty. Also, a lot of people don't know that there actually is a requirement on employers to notify anyone who didn't have any withholdings that they could be eligible for the earned income tax credit. It's a pretty small window of people, and there's very little enforcement that happens. So that's a real opportunity as you're thinking about state policy, which you'll see in a second, to think about how you might be able to work with employers to let people know that they're eligible for the earned income tax credit. On the state earned income tax credit side, many states have chosen to sort of piggyback on top of the federal credit. So right now, based on my count, and it seems like it's a moving target each year, about half the states have an EITC. And it's a really interesting mix of ones that are refundable or not, or something in between. And this refundability is really important, and that's a really wonky tax term. But the idea is that even if you get to the very bottom of your tax return and you don't have any tax liability left, so you don't owe anything else, all the credits have sort of been accounted for, if you get down to zero at the end, you can still get a refund. So you can get back sort of even more than you might have potentially put in. And so that money, that ability to put money directly, that cash into people's pocket, is such a critical part of the earned income tax credit. While it's great to reduce people's debt, as you heard from people saving and stockpiling different things, putting money directly in people's pocket that's flexible, that they can do what they need to do for their household, is just a very important aspect of it. And so the gold standard is definitely to have that credit to be refundable. In recent years, despite this sort of history of having great bipartisan support, we've really seen a divide between states that are seeking to increase the credit and those who are actually trying to cut it or eliminate. And that's something that we all have to be really paying attention to in these sort of challenging political times, is to bring people back to why we all cared about the earned income tax credit in the beginning. And the program hasn't, while it's expanded, it hasn't changed. We do see that it's still working. And in states, it's typically funded both by general funds as well as temporary assistance for needy family funds. I know that that's how it's also funded here in the state of Maryland. So just as an example, Maryland, just to be very confusing, has both a non-refundable and a refundable portion. So the 50% of the federal, that's the non-refundable. So, if people have any left at the end of their, if they don't have anything left by the time they get to the end of the tax return, they wouldn't get any of those those funds back, but they do have 25% on the refundable side. So you can see here over time that the formula started very small and grew over time. And actually, we just passed legislation last year to raise it up to 28%. And an important talking point for us and how we've been able to raise it at various points is that if there's any sort of major fee that's being changed or a tax that impacts low to moderate income families, we've really pushed the policy value that you need to hold these workers harmless. And so, for example, in 2007, when there was an increase in the sales tax, they were raising it up to 6%. So we said, then that's a regressive tax that's going to cost low-income working families more money. You need to raise the earned income tax credit as a way to offset that, and they did. And actually, when last year they made some changes to the estate tax, so they were making a change that was going to help high-income families, and we said at the same time, then you have to do something for low-income families too. And so that's been a really good sort of policy strategy for us. So thinking about state policy, refundability is really important, and then thinking about what outreach mechanisms your state may already have. Putting employer requirements in place if you don't already have them are really critical, because they're the ones who are actually working with these workers on a daily basis. Getting things into unemployment statements, again, the state sort of has oversight of that, as well as through departments of social services. There are also two places that have local earned income tax credit, New York City, which is 5% of the federal credit, and then Montgomery County has a really interesting one here in the state of Maryland called the Working Families Income Supplement Program. And it started out being 100% of the match for the state credit. So again, imagine this piggyback of you have the federal credit, then you have the state, and then you have a local. And at different times, they've changed the amount of the match just based on budget pressures. So you can sort of see how that's changed over time. How it works is that Montgomery County actually pays the Comptroller of Maryland to administer the program, so people get a check in July after they've got their taxes. So in Montgomery County, people refer to it as Christmas in July. So a few things that we need to think about in terms of how to stop the leaks that are happening around the earned income tax credit. One is paid tax preparer regulation. Again, these are the folks who are on the front line getting people the earned income tax credit. We need to make sure that they're competent and that they're accountable for fraud. And so there's some great model legislation out there that the National Consumer Law Center has out, and several states, Maryland included, that have passed legislation around that, as well as refund settlement products. So folks who file for the earned income tax credit are sort of disproportionately use refund anticipation loans and refund anticipation checks. Here in Baltimore City, about 23% of all of the EITC filers are in the state, but they're using more than 34% of all the refund anticipation loans in the state. So we're seeing a lot of people who are using these products, and it's just costing them a lot of money. We routinely see earned income tax credit returns where people are paying between $250 and $500. So then thinking about the moment of tax time, so people are getting this money back. There are some great resources out there to help them to split their tax refund, so you can spend some and save some, to buy some savings bonds at tax time. There's some great promotions where you get a chance to win in order to, just by saving part of your refund. And then, of course, I'd be remiss, as I'm about to pass it to Julian, to talk about funding for free tax preparation, which is just incredibly key. Again, if we want to maximize those EITC dollars, we need access to more free tax preparation. And the last slide here, and again, these are all sort of hot links. These are just some of the different pieces of legislation that Maryland Cash has passed over the last 7 or 8 years. And so these are just some great ways to think about how to stop some of the leaks that are happening. Again, looking at these refund anticipation loan disclosures, also around licensing and paid tax repairs, as well as positive things like increasing the state EITC and savings bonds on tax returns and things like that. So with that, I will pass it over to Julian.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. So my name is Julian Huerta. I'm the Deputy Director at Foundation Communities in Austin. And I'm going to be talking about how the fact that so many of the folks that we serve receive significant portions of their annual income through their tax returns has impacted the way that we offer some of our programming. So quickly about our organization. So we were founded about 25 years ago in Austin, Texas, and we're primarily an affordable housing provider. We own and manage about 2,700 units of housing, most of it in Austin, but we have some properties in North Texas as well. And we really believe in a housing plus services model. So we have on-site educational programs for kids and adults, health programming, and then lots of financial programs that are available not just to our residents, but to people throughout Austin especially. And I'll mostly be talking about Austin here. And so we got into doing free tax preparation because, A, we realized that this was a really important source of income for our residents and the people we served, and B, because there was a real need in Austin for one organization to kind of step up and really try to grow sort of work around tax preparation. And so we've been running the VITA sites in Austin for about 10 years. And so certainly our primary goal in our VITA program, which we call community tax centers, is in helping people maximize their refunds, and especially EITC. So during tax season, we have 5 locations that are open and try to make sure that they're open for very extensive hours, evenings and weekends. During the busiest part of the tax season, we'll have sites that are open 60 hours a week or more. We're really lucky to have a great pool of volunteers. So we typically have over 600 volunteers who've taken the certification test and who are volunteering in our sites. We offer our services free for people who aren't, or families who earn up to about $50,000 a year, and we kind of peg that upper limit to the point at which EITC benefits kind of zero out, and so it moves a little bit each year. And then in our model, we have paid site managers and intake specialists to make sure that our sites run smoothly and to keep things kind of consistent and of high quality. We do have currently one and are about to open a second location that is open year-round. And so this is important. I'll talk about kind of our financial center model, but this is important to being able to engage people not just at tax time, but at other parts of the year. And so just this past season in Austin, we prepared about 20,000 returns, bringing in over $34 million in refunds, and a big chunk of that, over $19 million, was in earned income tax credit. That's a population that we're especially reaching out to. I'll mention in Dallas, we served over 11,000 people and brought in over $15 million in total refunds. And so we really believe in this one-stop financial center model. So, while tax preparation is usually the first thing that people come to us for, we really want to engage them in lots of other ways. And so we have this whole menu of other kinds of financial education and tools that can really help people make the most of their refunds and move themselves forward financially. And so that's kind of the model that we employ. And I'm going to talk about a few of these components here. And so first is financial coaching. And so recognizing that families are getting what many times is their biggest single check of the year in their tax refund, we see that there's a great opportunity to help them use that in a way that moves them forward. So financial coaching for us is first of all a client-driven process where we're helping the client work on their financial goals, the things that they have identified as important to them. We use volunteer coaches that have a number of tools that they can use to help people budget and save and whatever goals that they've established, and then offer encouragement, and then what I think is most important, bring in some accountability to the process. Our clients meet with our coaches on an ongoing basis, usually up to about 8 sessions with the coach, and because they know that they're going to be coming back to report to the coach about their progress, there's that little bit of accountability, that people want to be able to report that they've done what they said they were going to do, right? And then coaching is really about establishing good financial habits, so helping people sort of figure out what they want financially, and then adjusting their habits and spending patterns and other things in ways that can move them towards those results that they want. And so in 2014, last year, we served over 500 clients in financial coaching. A couple of kind of broad outcomes. 86% reported being more confident about their finances, and over 70% made progress to their goals. And we do measure, like, within particular goals, like if somebody has established a goal to save money or to reduce their debt or to improve their credit, we do measure those progress in those areas too by doing follow-ups, usually after about 6 months after coaching has ended, to see what kind of progress people have made. And then helping people establish savings is really an important thing too, and one of the major goals that people establish or identify in coaching, but also when they're coming to have their tax return done. And we, as an organization that provides affordable housing, I mean, we definitely see among our residents that when people inevitably have a reduction in their number of work hours, or the primary breadwinner ends up getting sick or injured, very few of the folks that we serve in housing have savings, and we see what kind of a huge impact that can have for folks. And so we offer our clients a number of different tools, savings bonds through the tax return. I think Robin mentioned that. And savings bonds are just a really easy way to put some of the refund aside, and it happens through the Form 8888. I think Robin also mentioned the Save Your Refund contest that was done by D2D Fund, and we actually had the national winner a year ago in that program, and it was really an amazing woman who had come to us for tax preparation. Her name was Sharon Jones. She's a single mom with 2 kids. She was working 2 part-time jobs. She had just completed like 300 hours through Habitat for Humanity to build a home, and she was trying to get herself back into college. And so she won the $25,000 Save Your Refund National Grand Prize, which was really going to make it possible for her to go to school and do some things that are going to move the family forward. And so we were really excited to have that winner. We also offer IDAs, individual development accounts, mostly to our residents, but then to a few other folks who come to us for coaching. And then more recently, we've established a program to help people build a small savings account. And the goal in the Safety Net Savings Program that we have is to help people accumulate about $500 in savings that they will use when they need it, when those kind of emergencies come up. And so all of these are tools that are offered to folks through our financial center program and especially through our coaching program. One other thing that we've done, in doing free tax preparation, realized that as soon as somebody gets their tax return done, it's a great opportunity to do a FAFSA. If either the head of the household or one of the dependents in the household is thinking about or wanting to pursue higher education, we can help them do their FAFSA and make it much more likely that they're going to go, pursue higher education. And so last year we completed over 1,000 FAFSAs, and we gained access to our clients to over $3 million in grant monies to help fund their educations. We also have been doing scholarship mentoring, which is kind of a volunteer working one-on-one with a student who's looking for different scholarships, and have had over 100 students sort of do that. And again, these are folks who are coming to us for tax preparation, but then getting involved in things that can really help them move forward economically. And then just a couple of key challenges that I had identified, and I think Robin mentioned a couple of these things too. Just we still have a majority of EITC recipients who are using paid preparers, and and that means that they're paying a fee for getting their tax return done, which could be free at a VITA site. And it also means oftentimes they're being marketed, other financial products that, are expensive and sometimes are even predatory. And so, trying to keep people sort of out of that is, I think, really important. One sort of challenge in getting more people, I think, to use free tax preparation is sort of this perception that, well, if I go to a paid preparer, they're going to get me a larger refund, And if those paid preparers are following the rules like they should, then there really isn't a difference in the kind of refund that a client would get going to a paid preparer versus a VITA site. And then, refund anticipation checks. I know we haven't seen as many folks getting refund anticipation loans in Texas, but I know refund anticipation checks, which is just a way to get a refund electronically deposited into usually a debit card that clients can use. Again, is a pretty high fee item that somebody could accomplish the same thing at a VITA site just by if they have a bank account. And then for our program, we definitely want to engage our clients more deeply. Have more folks not just get their taxes prepared with us, but also engage in some of these other programs, financial coaching, or help in establishing a small business, or getting a FAFSA done. So we want a deeper connection to people and have that throughout the year. And that's why it's been important to try to have, one or two of our sites that are open year-round for people. And then we've definitely noticed that the Affordable Care Act is an important sort of opportunity for our clients. In doing coaching, we quickly saw that the largest source of debt for most of the clients that we were seeing was medical debt. And then certainly, the implications of not having health insurance and being able to go to a doctor when you're sick can often result in people missing more days of work and things like that. So just being able to get health insurance and seeing that as a financial issue and helping people connect with opportunities through the Affordable Care Act is really important. And so this past enrollment season, which just ended, we helped over 5,500 people purchase health insurance through the marketplace. And then, Robin mentioned this too, but just sort of it's challenging to keep our programs funded. We're lucky to have kind of 4 major funders who've been kind of with us year after year. United Way, the IRS, which does offer some funding to VITA grants, the City of Austin, and then a foundation, the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. But then every year it's a struggle to sort of fill in the other pieces. And so, continuing to sort of make the case that helping people move forward, these kinds of programs can really make a difference. It's something that we really need to do. So I think that's all that I've got. So I think, Hallie, you're back up.
Yeah, thank you to all 4 of you. Excellent presentations, and now we do have some questions that came in from our audience that's tuned in. This question that I will start with is for Sarah and Laura. So during your interviews with some of the recipients of the EITC, did you find that a theme that you saw or feedback that you got was that any of them had trouble handling the large lump sum and that they would prefer receiving smaller payments throughout the year?
That was not a theme we were hearing. People actually often were telling us that they would purposely engage in over-withholding. So they were increasing the size of the lump sum that they were getting at tax time on purpose. People felt like if they had money on hand, it might be really difficult for them to save it. It would be demanded by, another unexpected expense. And so there was sort of what we call a forced savings function from just getting that refund in a lump sum. That said, that's the system that people know, and so they are comfortable with that system. I'm not sure what people would say if they had the opposite experience, but we certainly weren't hearing complaints from people.
And just to piggyback on that and add one other dimension that people talked about was that people were often, they really liked the refund and getting it in a lump sum, and they were also deathly afraid of owing the IRS come tax time. And so I think most people thought, had in their mind some kind of advanced EITC, which was based on predicting what they would earn over the course of the year, and people were very afraid that if their earnings changed or their family situation changed, that they may all of a sudden end up owing the IRS at tax time, and so they wanted to avoid that at all costs as well.
And next question is aimed at Robin. Robin, this is regarding the refund anticipation loans. This commenter said they thought that those had actually ended. And so if you could speak on that. And then also, so if that is true, then are there healthier opportunities for short-term loans? How can they respond? How can I guess we, the great we, how can we respond to a taxpayer's needs for fast cash?
Sure. So we actually had seen a lot of the refund anticipation loans go away from some great action by the federal regulators, but we've unfortunately seen them come back this year. We had a sort of lull for a couple years where we didn't see them, and now we're seeing them. There's definitely a lot more people, I think, using refund anticipation checks, often in tandem with a prepaid card, which is, I think, another thing for us to pay attention to. I would say that, the best thing that we always push for people is to use direct deposit and use electronic filing, because that's how you're going to get your refund back the fastest. And whether that account is an actual bank account or on a prepaid card that has very low fees, I think that can be flexible, but it's definitely the fastest way. I think people absolutely have a need for short-term cash, but in this scenario, if in the state of Maryland, for example, you can get your state refund back in 1 to 3 days, and then the federal refund is about 7 to 15. Most people can sort of weather an extra week or so, especially if they're getting some portion of it up front. So I think we also have to push back a little bit about what people mean when they say, I need cash right now, because many of them might be able to get the state tax refund and that will sort of hold them through. But helping people get connected to safe and secure bank accounts or prepaid cards, especially before tax season, so it's ready to go for the refund, is a really important thing that we should be focusing on.
And I'm going to aim this question at Julian, and then someone else can take it up if you feel like you have something to add as well. But one commenter wanted to know if any of the panelists have recommendations about how to talk to recipients of these large tax refunds, how to talk to them about how to have an emergency savings without losing access to public benefits with asset limits such as SNAP and Medicaid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say a little bit about this. I'm not sure I have a ton of information. So the primary way that we have been getting folks to save at least a portion of their refund has been through the savings bonds, and and what we've seen has been people saving an amount that can be meaningful to them, but that isn't bumping up against the limits. I'm not sure if anybody else has some other ideas there.
I mean, it begs for policy change, right, to eliminate asset limits, because we shouldn't have a disincentive in place for people to be able to save. And I know it's a really hard pill for a lot of states to swallow, but the research shows that by eliminating these asset limits, you don't have all kinds of people coming in out of nowhere, that are driving fancy cars with big houses that are trying to get temporary cash assistance or food assistance. That's just simply not the case. So it's just an important policy initiative for us to push back on. But a very important caution for folks. We've seen, too, that when we've talked to folks, and we've actually eliminated asset limits here, but when we would talk to folks is, one, they might not know, or two, they thought that they couldn't save anything at all. So people don't always know exactly what the threshold is, so you do have to have a conversation about, well, how much is the actual asset limit, and also what's the redetermination period, because for some benefits it's 60 days, and so if people are sort of getting they might have money in savings, but they might also be doing these big sort of bulk purchases. How much money is actually left in that account at the end of 60 days? They still might be within the limit.
Thank you. Thanks, Robin and Julian, for those thoughtful answers. And actually, I think I'm going to have to cut the question and answer off as we are running a little bit short on time. I have a lot of really great questions coming in, though, so I'm going to pass the questions off via email to the panelists, and they can get back to the commenters if they, with the questions, with the answers. Thanks so much for all the questions that you submitted. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who tuned in today, and also thanks to our panelists. Thanks to Sarah, Laura, Robin, and Julian for your excellent presentations. There's a link on this last page, or the second to last page, with where you can purchase the book, which I have read, and it is an excellent read. And I do want to tell everybody that these presentation slides and the recorded webinar will be available on our website, cfs.wisc.edu. And just a reminder, we do have an upcoming webinar on June 1st. That actually will be via CFED's Assets and Opportunity Network. They will be hosting that from 1 to 2 p.m. Central Time. And CFS will be taking part, along with the Financial Clinic, answering questions in a financial coaching virtual interview format. The registration link is available right there, as you see below. Again, I'd like to thank everybody, and we'll see you next time.